Welcome, everyone. Welcome. If you have a seat open next to you, can you just raise your hand so folks can see where they can sit down? There are a bunch of people standing at the back. And we have a little room here if people want to set up a couple more chairs or sit on the floor. You're welcome to. I'm so moved to see a packed and overflowing room for this really critically important conversation. I met Yonatan over the summer in Aspen. And as soon as by the way, I also had to fight to get into that room because it was overflowing. Which is really good. These are the conversations that we want people to have to fight to get into because so many people are interested. And Yonatan, I was so moved by hearing your story. As many of you know, one of my dearest friends is Shifra Bronsnick, whose closest friend in the world was Vivian Silver, Yonatan's mother. And so I've known Vivian for years through Shifra. We've spoken so much about your mother. They used to take vacations together, and actually your mother introduced Shifra to her beloved Michael. And so after October 7th, when we heard about Vivian, it felt very deeply personal for all of us in all kinds of ways. But one of them was through Vivian, because so many of us either had worked with Vivian, knew Vivian, were friends of Vivian. And so to get to encounter you, her son, one of her two sons, Chaim and Yonatan are her sons, and to hear you speak and to hear you share about your mother and about your life since then and your commitment to justice has been incredibly moving. And I immediately tried to set the gears in motion to get you to come out here and be with us. Then we had the incredible opportunity to have Arab Aramin to come as well. And Arab, I just got a chance to speak with one-on-one for the first time just now at lunch. I didn't know when we made this arrangement that your father was Bassam Aramin, who so many of us know through a paragon. We have heard and read about your family's story for many years. And it's incredibly profound and moving to be able to sit with you. Arab will share with us also about his beloved sister, Abir, who was killed by an IDF soldier on her way from school, and the work of your family and your own transformation and why you believe that this path is the path forward. So I thank all of you for being here, and I really am so deeply grateful for the two of you. I would love for us to start, if you would, by sharing each of you a little bit of your own story, telling us about your families, your lives, and this work, and why it matters so profoundly to you. I'm going to give you this one.
So, hello, everybody. Thank you for having us here. Can you hear me okay? So as was said, I'm Yonatan Zeigen. My mother, Vivian Silver, didn't survive the massacre in Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. But before that, she did me the service of raising me in a very politically conscious environment. Because she made the decision in 1974, she chose to come to Israel. She was born and raised in Canada, and she did that in a time, at least for her, that there wasn't that much of a clash between being a Zionist and believing in Tikkun Olam. That kind of changed throughout the years, but she kept on holding to her convictions all of her life. So I, as I said, grew up in that environment. I met Palestinians from a very early age because she was very much involved in all sorts of projects and initiatives, and she co-ran an organization that worked in Gaza and in the West Bank, and together with the Bedouin community in Israel. I remember myself going to visit friends and colleagues of hers in Gaza in 2000, right before the Second Intifada broke. And I remember feeling this duality. On the one hand, it's very natural for me. I'm seeing friends, I'm seeing, and it felt safe and natural, as I said. On the other hand, I knew that none of my peers would ever experience what I experienced, because the separation and the differentiation between the Palestinian people and the Jewish people was so tightened by then already. And since then, it only grew more and more, and the walls grew higher. So when I became in my early 20s, I moved from Kibbutz Be'eri, I moved to Jerusalem, and I became active. And I thought this would be my path. I went to study law in order to become a human rights lawyer, and to be involved in the movement. But as it goes sometimes, I had my first child. I needed to get good grades in university. I needed to start putting food on the table. That is the personal aspect of it, but also the context of Israel and Palestine, that peace became, I grew up in the 90s. It was hopeful times. It was times that we thought that change is upon us. And then throughout the 2000s, it became more and more distant and more distant, and the narrative of there's no partner, and it's all futile, and peace became like quirky word. So I became distant from it as well. And I went into what I call a political coma, trying to hold on to this fantasy of just living normal bourgeois life in Israel, going to work, raising my kids. I did a master's in social work, I became a social worker. And the reason why I call it a fantasy is because it was never sustainable. Before October 7th, life in Israel and Palestine wasn't sustainable. And now, when we're talking about change, we're not talking about going back to October 6th. We're talking about creating something entirely new. But back then, I fed into this, trying to hold on to that fantasy. And then October 7th happened. And for me, it was really a slap to the face and a realization that it was a fantasy. That what can I do after speaking with her throughout the morning and saying goodbye to my mother, to a loved one, live, while she is being murdered. At least I got the chance to do that, and I'm grateful for that. Most of my colleagues in the parent circle, bereaved families in Israel and Palestine, didn't get the chance to say goodbye. But I sat there I won't bore you with the story of she was considered a hostage for more than a month, and that was an entirely different, intense period of time. But after she was identified, I sat there quietly and I said, how can I contrast the feeling of helplessness that I personally felt during that day, but I think all of us share a helplessness in front of this reality of prolonged war, of an occupation that through the years became transparent to Israelis, but is never transparent to Palestinians. What can we do with that helplessness? It made me, it gave me a sense of urgency and responsibility that I now have to utilize this new tragic status of bereavement in order to be invested, in order to do the right thing that Vivian knew all along. When I teased her, when I used to tease her, she never lost her hope. She was working for it every day. And now after she was killed, people started to tell me, you see, that's what she got. I said, it's the other way around. She was right all along. We didn't listen. We weren't there with her. If we were, it would have been prevented. This is not fate. This is something we choose every day. The conflict, the occupation is something we do to ourselves every day. So this sense of responsibility made me quit my job and just start this manic phase of activism. It includes being a part of the Parent Circle Family Forum, together with my good friend, brother, Aramin. And when we do that, when we talk together in front of audiences, here we can talk about why we're here talking in English instead of back there in the questions and answers. I think it's an important point. But when we do that, in my mind, we signal that the price we paid is unacceptable. It's not something we need to continue living with as if it can't be different. And the only way to do that is to bridge over the divide, to understand that pain is universal, and that also success is universal. There's no one-sided success in Israel and Palestine. It will only be achieved when the two peoples reach an agreement and share the land. 7 million Palestinians won't disappear, 7 million Jews won't disappear. So it's a matter of time. Either extermination of one side, and I don't think we'll ever get there, I hope not, or an agreement ending the occupation, ending the conflict, and reaching an agreement, which in my mind, the only thing we are lacking now is the will, not the possibility. It's possible because me and Arab are not special people. If we do it, if we can hold hands after paying the ultimate price, then it's only natural that other people can do it as well. So that's one part of my doing the. I joined other organizations, mobilizing the peace camp in Israel, going to do advocacy tours in the United States and Europe. We also established a prize fund in my mother's name, the Vivian Silver Impact Award, which will grant the first one this year in November. It's for two women, one Jewish, one Palestinian, who are involved in the work of either cross-border work or shared society coexistence in Israel, or promotion of women to leadership roles. So we're raising the funds for it now. If it seems like a hint, it is. And I'll pass the mic.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom Lachem. Assalamu alaikum. I think I want to stand up and I want to look at your eyes. My name is Aramin. I was born in East Jerusalem on 14th of January 94, and I will try to send my message here today with my weak English. It's not my first language. So my story started on 16th of January 2007, but I would like to share with you a few things about my hero, the one because of him is still alive and I'm able to speak to you today. My hero is my father. His name is Bassam Aramin. He was in the Israeli jail for 7 years and he arrested in the age of 16. And my father's crime was to throw stones on the soldiers who was broken into the village where my father was growing up. And also, after my father get out of the jail, met my mother, and then they have 6 kids. I am the oldest one. And when I reached to the age of 5, I drove my father crazy by my questions, especially about the jail and how the jailers and the soldiers was treating my hero over there. And he never answered my questions, and I didn't know why. So I will stop here with my hero, and I will start with my story. On the 16th of January 2007, I was 13 years old. And that time, an Israeli soldier shot and killed my sister Abir in front of her school for no reason. And maybe the only reason it was there because she's a Palestinian girl. Abir, she was 10 years old only, and she's the 3rd child in the house. And for me, she was my best friend, my partner, my everything there. Especially in that age, I was so naughty boy, slapping the kids in the school and going back to her to tell her no one can beat me of the kids. And she always was telling me how to act good, how to behave good, how to be a good kid. But also, unfortunately, my second mother, she's not there anymore. And we are the human being. We was born like that in our nature. If someone slaps us, so we want to give it back. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I decide right away to take revenge for my sister's blood. And especially in that age, I wasn't know there is a human being the other side because I never met an Israelis as a human being. All the Israelis that I have met until that age, only the soldiers who standing on the checkpoint searching me, searching my people, searching my family. Or the soldier who was coming to my house at 5 o'clock in the morning, broken the door, taking my father from the bed because he has a Palestinian ID. And my mother, she has an Israeli ID, and they can't be in the same bed without permission for my father. So, as I said in that time, I wanted to take revenge and to kill all the Israelis around the world because they killed my sister. And I didn't know from where can I bring a gun and how can I use it. And thanks God that I didn't know from where and how to use it. But also my gun was thrown everywhere, which is the stone, the rocks. And I don't know if you know or not, by the time the Palestinian, we became so professional by throwing stones on the soldiers. So I start to make my revenge over there. And also in that time, I was lying to my family that I'm going to the school every day. And I couldn't make it anymore after Abir. My school was in front of her school, and we was going together from the house to the school and waiting for her to get out of the school to go back again to the house together. So I couldn't make it anymore. I was imagining her everywhere, and we here was playing, there we was smiling. And also I was lying to my family in that time. I was telling them every day, like, I'm going to the school, but I create a new school for myself, which is the checkpoint. And by the time one of my father's friends saw me on the checkpoint throwing stones, so called my father and told him, save your son or you're gonna lose him. So in that day I went back home, and my hero was waiting for me behind the door, and the first question was, how is your school? I said, it's great, and the teachers love me. And he said, you start to lie, so we have to talk. And my father told me in that day that he lost 7 years of his life for nothing, and he is not ready to lose me in jail for 7 years or under the ground forever, and he has more than enough pain. And actually in that day also I called my father as a cheater, because he kept talking to those Israelis who was coming to the house to support my mother and my father. And I told my father that, yeah, I think shame on you, and you're not that, I don't know, you're not strong, and I think you can take my sister's revenge, so I will do it instead of you. And my father in that time told me that, you're right, one Israeli soldier shot and killed your sister, but more than 100 Israeli people was next to me for 3 days in the hospital trying to support me and to support your mother. You have to get out of that black box that you fall in with hate and revenge and blood, and it's not our way. We're not weak people to kill people, but we're very strong people to be against our anger and hate. And the only way to make peace with yourself. And if you could, you can get out of the door, and if not, stay in your room, much better for yourself and me. So in that day, I didn't want to hear anything from my father, but I could feel the pain in his heart, in his words, because already I have it. So I promised my father and God, and I said, I will never throw stones again, but I will never stop revenging for my sister's blood. And my father accepted that, and he said, it's great. So I confused myself more and more. And I told myself, how can I do it now without violence? So I went back to my hero and I said, how can I do it now? And my father told me that there is too many kinds for revenge, and I can make my revenge without violence. But first of all, I have to make peace with myself. So I was thinking a lot, how can I make it? How can I do it? But I couldn't reach to any point. And after 2 years of that, I went to Buchenwald, one of the death camps in Germany, and I will never forget my trip to there, because the beginning of the change, it starts from there. I thought all the way to there, I'm gonna learn something big from that big Hitler who killed 6 million Jewish people, and to do it with my enemies back home. And I wasn't know what waiting for me over there. And in general, I don't know if you know or not, in our eyes, it's a big lie. And why it's a big lie? Because your enemy, what is saying, his history, it's lie, so you don't believe nothing for your enemies. And when I reached there, I put my feet in that death camp. After 2 seconds, I start to cry like crazy for the people who lost their life for nothing. And I told myself 2 years ago I wanted to kill all of them, and now I'm crying for the victims. What's going on with me? So I drove myself crazy more and more, and I get out of that death camp with a lot of questions, but there is no answers, because still until that time I don't know my enemy. And I went back home, as I said, with a lot of questions. And I heard something which I'm carrying it with me until today. If you want to kill yourself, keep hating your enemy. But if you want to win your enemy, learn more about your enemy. So I didn't want to die. And yes, I want to win my enemy. And I start to learn Hebrew. I start to teach myself Hebrew. And after a while, I wanted to meet those enemies and to know more about them, to beat them or to win them. And also I was shocked in that time because, as I said, there is no human being the other side, so they don't die, they don't lose, just we. So I heard a lot of stories like my brother and other brothers and sisters from the Israeli side in the parent circle. And with the time, every time that I was talking to an Israeli, I was finding out a lot of things, which is I'm losing hate for the other side, and I'm losing fear from the other side. And I start to meet the enemies as a human being. And with my small experience in Bain, I learned that every story has two faces, two parts, one good and one bad. And because we don't know each other that well, so always we choose to know the bad face of each other. And we think that we know each other that well because of what we're hearing about each other and what we see in the social media. And also it's a lie, or it's a big lie. So in 2014, I joined the parent circle after 7 years of my sister's death. And it took with me 7 years to understand that behind every Palestinian and Israeli and American, there is a human being. And we have to meet each other as human beings. So until today, I'm doing my revenge. And here, I'm doing my revenge with you guys, but in different way. And Jalaluddin Rumi says, yesterday I was smart that I tried to change all the world, but today I became a wise that I start to change myself first. And Mahmoud Darwish says, we're killing each other for Jerusalem, and we're losing our souls and kids for Jerusalem. And in the end, we will be under Jerusalem, and Jerusalem don't know about us. So it's not worth it to keep killing each other for the land, and in the end, we're not gonna have it. And I believe in something so much, and I lost a lot of friends about what I'm gonna tell you right now, but at least I'm still alive and I can speak, and I love to speak a lot. Because it's the only way that we can fix the problem, to talk to each other, to know each other, and then we have the option to decide to keep killing each other, or there is a different way. I believe so much that our land, our country, Palestine or Israel, it's not for the Palestinians at all. And also it's not for the Israelis at all. It's just gift from God for both sides, and we have to learn how to share it together. Or in the end, we're gonna make it from, thank you. Or we're gonna make it from that big paradise, two big graves for two crazy nations. I believe so much that we have just two options. And the first one, it's very easy to die, especially in our country. It's very easy to die. And the second option, to talk to your enemy, to know your enemy. And because I understood that I was born to a strong man, strong father, so I have always to choose the hard things, and my choice was to talk. and to show my humanity to the others and to see others as a human being. I don't know what to say. I think today, I wish if I don't have the chance to come to hear you today by losing my sister and to tell you my story. But anyways, she's not here anymore, and I wish her to be proud of me to save a lot of Abirs in my side and a lot of Abirs on the other side instead of killing people in her name. And one of the biggest reasons that pushing me every day to do what I'm doing, it's my son, Bassam. I want to change tomorrow for my kid. I don't want my son to lose a sister or brother like how I did. And I think I'm not ready to lose son or daughter like my father. And I will finish it with Martin Luther King says, tomorrow we will not remember the silence of our friends, but we will, tomorrow we will not remember the words of our enemies, but we will remember the silence of our friends. And actually, our friends, we need your voice. We need you so much, but we don't want or we don't need you to bring our conflict to your country, because I think and I believe you have more than enough in your own. Actually, also, if you're thinking that if you will be pro-Palestine only or Israel only, you will help, you will be part of the solution, I'm sorry to say you're wrong. You have to be pro. Thank you. You have to be pro peace and justice and humanity for both sides. As a Palestinian guy who lived under occupation for 30 years, I'm telling you, from the river to the sea, everyone should be free, Palestinians and Israelis. And thank you so much for listening and having us here.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. One of the things that I'm struck by, and I want to come back and revisit what you were saying about importing the conflict here in just a moment. But first, with your stories, I want to ask you, both of you were raised by parents who deeply lived this message of a third way, of the possibility of peace, and both of you had to get there on your own. And you, because of the tragedy of the killing of your sister, had to go through the yearning for revenge, violent revenge, and then learn that that's not the way. And you, because of what you described as the political coma, which is such a powerful phrasing that I think we can all relate to and understand, not only there, by the way, not only among Israelis, but among Americans. We go through political coma here too. And so you had to learn the ways of your parents, but on your own. And so what I want to ask you to help us with is, how can we help a generation of Israelis and Palestinians learn the lessons of Bassam and Vivian without, God forbid, having to suffer the loss themselves the way that the two of you did? Is there a way to communicate this message when the human instinct is, as you said, Arab, when you see violence, your reaction is violent, right? When violence comes to you or your people, you want to respond with violence. How do we counter that instinct and help people understand that there is another way? The only way forward is the way of peace, without them having to go through this terrible, immediate, very proximate loss that the two of you have both had.
Okay, I will say a short story. Hello? I'm here. Okay. I will tell you a short story, and I think instead of answering, I have my dear and close friend. His name is Zakaria, and I'm also member in Combatants for Peace. And my father, he's one of the creator in the Combatants for Peace, and they created in 2005. And my sister, she lost her life in 2007. So it was a big exam for my father to choose the path of peace that he chose in 2007, or to go back to what he started in his life when he was young. Zakaria also have some sad story with the Israeli soldiers, and after what happened with him, he doesn't like to hear the Hebrew language or to meet with Israelis, and I couldn't handle it anymore. And I wanted to wake up my best friend, so I told Zakaria I will take him with me to one of the meetings. And he said, no, I'm not going. I don't have nothing to do there. And I lied to him in that day. Sometimes it's good to lie to save people. So I lied to him and I said, I'm taking you to the sea. And I took him to that meeting in the West Bank, and there is no sea. So he got crazy, but anyways, he's there. And he went down or off from the car, he took the chair and he sat in the corner, and we was there for 2 days. And in the first day, Zakaria didn't talk to no one, and me too. And I thought, like, that's it, it's done between us. And the second day, Zakaria, he started to ask few questions to Israeli girls, and I thought the beauty of the girls, but it wasn't the reason. Yeah. They said something, and Zakaria wanted to know more about what they saying. And then 3 weeks after that, Zakaria became one of the people is very active in Combatants for Peace, and especially in the demonstration in the street against the occupation, and in the first line with the Israelis. And after that, Zakaria came to me and said, thank you for taking me there and opening my eyes. And I said to myself, yes, I could open one eye, and one eye could open a lot of eyes, but things take time. Especially in my community, in my side, when we're talking about peace and reconciliations, right away anyone can tell over their checkpoint and we can go through, I don't know, anywhere. But with the time, when people meet each other as a human being, they understand things. And I hope I answered your question.
I'll add that my process was a bit more analytical. For me, there is a basic truth that seems to elude most people, at least in the Middle East, that there is no forceful or military solution to the symptom of security or liberation. And when we understand that our goal is to live secure lives and liberated lives and to enjoy equal rights, then it's easy to tap into this counterintuitive thing of leaving your camp and saying, oh, I'm threatened, so I need a unique group, a differentiated group. If I'm Jewish, then the Jewish people. If I'm Palestinian, then the Palestinian people. Because the only way for Palestinians to live free, and the only way for Israelis to be secure, the only way for us to exist there is to share hands and to cancel that differentiation between us. And then it's clear that the problem is not security. Security is the symptom. And the way to solve it, there's no wall that is high enough. There's no weapon sophisticated enough. The only way for your enemy not to hurt you is if you are able to transform your enemy to your partner. And you do that by working together. In North America, it means making the effort for interfaith action. There's a lot of programs, and the Parent Circle also has a program for that. You should look into. You can look at. It was launched now in New York. There's a facilitator guide. It's like sessions like this, but they're televised, and there's a curriculum, and you can do a lot of. So make the effort to bring Muslims and Jews, expats, Palestinians and Israelis, for co-liberation.
I'm reminded of something that Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib wrote who's a Palestinian from Gaza, and he came here to the U.S. He actually lives I think he lives in San Francisco now, and came down to UCLA right at the time that things really erupted at the end of the spring semester. And he said he was walking through the encampment, and he was wearing a T-shirt that said, "From the river to the sea, only peace will set us free." And how the people who looked at him didn't trust him, because that's not a message that comes from that's not a message that people hear very often in this place. People think that if I want to advocate for liberation, and if I want to advocate for security, I can't imagine only peace will set us free. We have a whole different script that we say. And so I think part of what I'm so struck by, which I heard you say today, and Yonatan, we spoke about over the summer, is the way that diaspora communities, Jewish diaspora and Palestinian diaspora. And by the way, I'm just so struck by this reality that there are about 7 million Palestinians in the land and about 7 million Palestinians in the diaspora. There are 7 million Jews in the land. There are about 7 or 8 million Jews in the diaspora. I mean, the parallels between our communities are extraordinary. And as a diaspora community, I think a lot about how can we not do damage there? How can, with all of our fear, our anguish, our trauma, our concern, our love, we often end up exacerbating the problem instead of helping achieve a different kind of peaceful solution. And so I want to hear you think that through with us, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you found on the road, because I know that in some of the places that have really erupted in the last year, they're so entrenched in this dichotomous thinking, I don't think that Parent Circle voices would even be welcome there, because there's such a strong insistence on anti-normalization, on not hearing each other's pain. There are Jews who don't want to hear how many Palestinians have died in Gaza. The number 40,000, immediately people will start saying, well, who counted? And that's Hamas, and you're trusting. And then you talk to people about October 7th, and you'll hear denialism, and there was no rape, and there was no numbers, and Israel's responsible. I mean, it feels like people don't want to hear. They don't want to hear and see each other's humanity, which is the only thing that will set us free. And so what have you found on the road, and how do you overcome people's resistance to hearing this message?
Well, we came here right after a week in New York, and we've been to the places. We talked in Colombia, we talked in NYU, we talked in Jewish centers like the 92nd Street Y and the Stryker Center. What I was surprised from is that they have moved, it seems like they've moved past the phase of a clash and into a phase of total denial of the other's existence. So there was no pushback. but there was also not a lot of people. And wait, I lost my train of thought. I really lost it. Deep down.
I can say one thing that maybe will spark it. One of our congregants, Deborah Bronner's brother, is Ethan Bronner, who writes for the New York Times, or wrote for the New York Times. He wrote a piece toward the end of the Second Intifada that I think about all the time, where he was talking about the wall. And he said, you know, the real tragedy of this generation, this next generation, is that they're not going to know each other. That Israelis and Palestinians will not know each other because there's literally a wall in between them. And while some claimed that the wall was, you know, really necessary in order to stop the terror attacks that were happening, what it did was it raised an entire generation of people who don't have friends, who don't even have like people working in their homes or working in the same companies together or offices together. Like they're just not engaging each other. So all they can do is what Arab was saying earlier, look at videos about each other on social media, which is never going to show them the real truth of who they are. I don't know if that sparks.
I think what is very tragic about the normalization issue is that I can understand the sentiment. You don't want to legitimize your victimizer. But the problem is when you cancel dialogue, what you do actually is normalize the conflict. And that's, I think, a crucial point that and the wall contributed to that, is that we think that we will be able to manage to exist differentiated. And now, after October 7th, Bichlal, there was like the Palestinians got this fantasy that maybe something can change through violence. And the Israelis have been living with this fantasy that we can suppress the Palestinians with the occupation and manage the conflict forever. But those notions are very, very dangerous. Because the only ability, like we said before, the only ability for the existence of our peoples is through agreement of how to share the land. It can be a federation, it could be a one-state majority rule, it could be two states separated but cooperative. It doesn't matter. The technicalities will solve themselves the minute we will have the will. It's not that we don't want peace because it's too complicated. It is complicated because we don't want it. The minute leaders will create the settings of genuinely sitting to a table in equality-based thinking of how can we get the two peoples to agree equally, not to oppose something, not one dominant over the other. The minute we will come to the table with that standpoint, the technicalities will solve themselves very quickly. It's simple. And now, you know, what gives me a bit of hope is that I feel that now we're in a point of time, that morality and interest-based thinking are aligned. Because we were able to say in the past, no, the occupation, it's maybe it's immoral, but it's in our interest, because that's how we create security. But that was false, and now it's clear that it's wrong. So, you know, I wish that we would behave from a moral standpoint from the beginning. But we didn't. But now it's also aligned with interest-based. The only way for Israel to exist as a Jewish state, no matter the format, but to exist, is if we reach an agreement with the Palestinians. So even if you have a leader who doesn't concern himself with morality, he will reach the same conclusion if, you know, the international community gives us a stronger signal.
I would love to open it up for a couple of questions. And so would you, if you don't mind, just introduce yourselves as you stand. And we won't be able to hear from everyone, but Susan will make her way around and give you a mic so you can be heard.
Hi, thank you. ותודה שאתם פה. I have a question, and you don't have to answer. I'm like posing a larger issue, which is the larger historical context. And I will preface and say that I'm Susan's friend. I'm Jewish. I was born in Israel, and I served in the IDF, and I very much grew up with the narratives that many Israelis grow up through. And it was only when I came to the U.S., as you're both saying, that I learned the history of Israel through understanding the history of Palestinians and learning about the Nakba and the 1940s and what led to the establishment and the refugee crisis. And I guess my question is, how do we get through all of this without the historical reckoning? Because October 7th is just a moment in time, but really this crisis, it's not even a conflict, it's a crisis, happened way before with the aliyah of Jewish people and the displacement of Palestinians. And that's something that many Israelis, and I think many people in the US, you both talked about denial. That is perhaps the major point that led to where we are today. And so when we talk about peace and dialogue and each other's humanities, I'm just saying this from a Jewish-Israeli perspective, and I'm speaking of my family and friends. They are unwilling to even acknowledge how the state was established, let alone what led to October 7th. What led to people committing, and I do not justify by any means, but for me, when October 7th happened, I had to sit down and say, what leads people to commit these crimes and to put it in a puzzle that is much bigger? So I hope I'm making sense. You don't necessarily have to respond to that.
What was the question, though? It was a very interesting comment.
Is there, I think I can say, is there, can you envision a future in which we could actually do an honest reckoning about our past in order to make this shared future even imaginable?
The Parent Circle, for example, it's a less political organization and it's more a reconciliation training organization, because reconciliation is a huge part of being able to create a sustainable agreement, a coexistence agreement. Of course, that will be a part of it's like a tongues movement. There's the civil society that trains the hearts and the minds and creates the environment that can accept the other and can and insists on informing and education. But we have to have the political sphere in order to start like a new setting where this is relevant. Mm-hmm. Because there's a glass ceiling for civil society. We can't change the minds of everybody until we get to the leader. It needs to come top to bottom as well. So this is not to say that our work is futile. It's very important. We have a saying in the Parent Circle, it's like we're scooping the sea with a spoon. Mm-hmm. But the sea would have been higher in a spoon if we hadn't. Mm-hmm. And it's significant. And we'll continue to do the work, but we also are expecting the settings to change, because then it will go, look at South Africa, look at Rwanda, look at Northern Ireland. People create conflicts. Look at Israel and Germany. Look at Germany and France. It doesn't matter. People create conflicts and people solve conflicts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'll just add one thing to that, and then I'm going to ask if our questions can be very short, like a sentence or two, just so that we can hear from a bunch of people. I was in a meeting before October 7th with a group of people who were thinking about what that just and shared future might look like. And one of the ideas that came up, which was so exciting to just think about, is what would a museum look like that tried to tell the stories of both peoples, that really tried to hold and honor the journey that that Palestinians and that Jews had to go through in order to end up in this place together, so that visitors would be invited to this kind of dual narrative. I will also say that in this school where where IKAR rents space, there's a dual narrative curriculum. And this is a modern Orthodox high school, but there's a dual narrative curriculum that all of the 11th graders learn in the most advanced Israel education class here, and which I think is just so important, because what they're learning about Nakba in this context, and they're learning about where does the pain come from, because we don't have to deny each other's pain in order to also have our own, and I think that's really critically important. Okay, a couple of very quick questions. Yeah.
So you made a reference actually to South Africa, and it's a place that I have been close to for 50 years. In the late 1970s, everything seemed impossible. But people organized, and they organized from the grassroots, and they did it and could sustain it because of solidarity. And the two of you are modeling a different way. My question is, how lonely is it? Is a grassroots emerging? Do you have solidarity building for what you're trying to do?
כמה אתה בודד בעבודה הזאת של שלום? היית מאוד יוצא דופן, שיש לך קהילה שגדלה עם הזמן?
Okay, I think I'm not lonely, I'm not alone, and I have 750 families with me who believe in what I believe, who are trying to do their best like me. And I think also we have another organizations like Combatants for Peace, or standing together or building together. So we're not alone. But I think our voice need a lot of support from everywhere, and especially inside our country, Palestine or Israel. And unfortunately, I have to add something about my side. There is a lot of people who's with what I'm doing right now, but we are people without power. So it almost doesn't help. But we're trying our best to shout out how much we can.
Thank you. Rabbi Gottlieb.
I like what you said about the glass ceiling in the civil society that then comes up to that glass and can't break through that glass. We've been working as peace activists for many years, beginning with Roots and all the other organizations, and have great optimism until war breaks out and everyone comes back to their own family and it gets hopeless again. So I think there are two issues here. One is self-interest. That's very important. When two sides feel that this is their self-interest, that's not just what we're professing amongst ourselves, but actually living that and finding a leader, because politics has to be faced, unfortunately. Corrupt politics has to be decimated, and it will only be done when they feel that there's a self-interest, that the way of war has led us to disaster. The only other point I want to make is about denial, that what you mentioned about the history, it's clear when we study history, but some people don't want to hear the history because that will weaken them and weaken their moral stance of this is our land or the messianic thing. So I think education is important to get people to really study the history of the conflict from both sides, not just the Zionist side, etc. But self-interest, we have to think critically, how do we develop that? That's the only thing that makes change politically, that when both sides feel it's in their interest.
I want to address that it's not only two sides. It's not only a particular thing for Israel and Palestine. North America, the United States, and the international community are not just passive bystanders. they actively enabled the status quo before October 7th, and they have been actively sponsoring the war since. So there's accountability to the United States. And that seems to be not enough talked about, this difference between, oh yeah, we wish it would be different, and the amount of unconditional resources being poured in to our conflict. So when I come to Congress or to the Hill or to European countries, I push them very hard, it doesn't work. But I push them to create an international coalition with authority, with goals and deadlines, and self-interest. We're talking about geopolitics. This conflict is a pain in the ass of the world dividing into axes, and America can't assert its dominance without a new alliance with Saudi Arabia, with other Arab countries, and we can't do that if we don't solve the conflict. So once, they had the interest of having an Israeli extension, an extension in the Middle East for the American, like a 50-something state. That's not in the interest anymore. We became a liability. The conflict became a liability instead of an asset. So, but there's work to be done. Jews, you have such disproportional power in the American administration. And I see, what's her name, Edelson, saying, I'm going to give Trump money if he supports annexation. Where is the conditional democratic Jewish money? Where is the Jewish pressure on the Democrats to be bold in saying being friends of Israel means to end the occupation and the conflict?
Okay, we'll take one last question. I think it's Eric. Oh, I'm sorry, two questions. Akiva, Eric, and then we'll wrap.
A lot of the pressure against what you're working for is religious fundamentalism, both in the Arabic world and in the Jewish world, which we here are more familiar with, the Jewish fundamentalism in the Jewish world. To what extent can you, is there opportunity for you to do outreach into the shuls in Israel and into the mosques in Palestine and the West Bank? Do you have access to those communities and to get into those shuls and mosques to do this conversation there?
Actually, no, not in the mosque and not in Beit Knesset, because our conflict, it's not about religion. Our conflict, it's about land. And if you're asking, I will answer you in a different way. If we're speaking to Palestinian and Israelis people, yes, we do. And I think it's much important to talk there, not to come to you Americans. And, for myself, I did more than 1,000 meetings in the Israelis and in Palestinian schools. And I said, I am not the enemy for the Israelis. And the Israelis not the enemy of mine, but our enemies. Both of us, it's the fear that we have for others from the other side, the fear and the hate for the others. When we're losing the hate and the fear for the others, everything possible, everything very easy. So yeah, we're talking to Palestinians and Israelis over there a lot.
Akiva, I'm also going to add, while we bring the mic over to Eric, that one of our community members, Hannah Roth, her brother is Rabbi Daniel Roth, who was just here for the bar mitzvah of his nephew, and he's involved in an organization called Mosaica, which is about trying to bring religious Muslims and religious Jews who are also interested in peace building into relationship with each other. And I think that work on a parallel track with the work that you're doing is really critical. Thank you for asking that. Okay, Eric, last question.
So I want to thank you both for being here and doing this. I'm sure none of it is easy, and we really appreciate it. And my question for you is a follow-up of what you were just saying about the conversations that you're having with other Palestinians. And I'm sure there are a lot of people for whom what you're doing, having these kind of dialogues, feels like a betrayal. It's a sellout. So what have you seen is effective in changing the hearts and minds of the people that take the anti-normalization position? What have you done or seen that's actually been able to open them up and move them in some way?
Thank you for this question. Actually, a lot. And before I went to talk to the enemies, to know them more and more, I was talking, after I knew my enemies, I went back to talk to my friends, to my community, because I remember long time ago, I was calling my father as a cheater because he talking to those Israelis. So I start to explain myself, and I start to explain to my community, to my friends, who's respecting what I'm doing today. And as I said before, I'm doing what I'm doing to save a lot of Bassams, a lot of Abirs in my side. And when I'm telling my friends that I'm hanging out with my brother, or I'm talking with my brother, and he's not any enemy anymore for me. And he's fighting the occupation to save my life more than his life. So, of course, they gonna accept it, and, and also not all the Palestinians, agree about what I'm doing. But I promise that a lot of Palestinians who agree that what we're doing, it's the only way, or otherwise we can't tell. A lot of kills in the West Bank, a lot of kills in Gaza, a lot of damage everywhere. And because of ignoring each other.
Thank you so much. We're going to close. I'm so grateful for the two of you flying out here to Los Angeles so that you could speak to us today. I want to say two things. One of the ways that I convinced Yonatan to come out here is because I really wanted to not only amplify both of these voices, but also to help support the Vivian Silver Impact Fund. If you are able, I really would encourage you to contribute. This is one of the ways that we're continuing Vivian's legacy. And actually, I saw Shifra sent me the other day, there was a tent set up in Gaza by Palestinians in Gaza for women and children, and they called it the Vivian Silver Medical Tent, meaning Palestinians in Gaza named their tent after a Jewish Israeli who had been murdered on October 7th. There is a way to create a new discourse here. And I want to really encourage all of us to move away from our sense of helplessness and despair and move into action to support these voices who really are fighting for and writing a different kind of future. We can do that by supporting the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum. We can do that by supporting the Vivian Silver Impact Fund. We can do it by following and amplifying the two of you and your colleagues as much as possible. I really bless the two of you that you are able to find strength in body and spirit to continue this work. I bless you that your children are safe, that this war ends and ends now, and that we collectively can help lift up a vision of a different kind of future for your children, for our children, and for all of us. Thank you so much.